Welcome to the Voice of Retail. I'm Michael Amlani, your host. The Voice of Retail is produced in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada, and it's presented by Hale, a performance marketing partner trusted by brands like ASICS, Sage, and Orange Theory to scale with focus and impact. Liza, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast, or should I say welcome back to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you on, fellow Rethink Retail top retail expert and fellow also NRF top voice. Congratulations on that. I'm pretty happy to be in that list, and it's great to see you there.
Me too. It's my second year, actually. Yeah. So very exciting.
I think we're the only Canadians on that list.
Haha, go Canada.
Go Canada. There we go.
Go Canada.
The Canadian invasion. There we go. Anyway, if anybody's listening and doesn't know what that is, it's a program connected to the big show, the NRF show coming up in January. Off mic, we were just talking about store tours and the fun of the big show, which is happening in New York City early January. You will be there. I'll be there. And just a pile of fun, meeting, catching up with people and doing all that great stuff. So who are you and what do you do for a living? Just in case somebody hasn't listened to our past episodes or somehow doesn't know you in this world of merchandising retail, tell us about yourself, what you do for a living.
Sure. So my name is Liza Amlani, and many people know me as the Chief Merchant and Principal of Retail Strategy Group. I am a former merchant of 2 decades, and what we do at Retail Strategy Group is we partner with global brands and retailers to install materials-first operating models, accelerate time to market, and really sharpen product decisions across categories from apparel to footwear to accessories, luxury, and even retail tech.
You know, I really appreciate you having you join me on the pod, because it's great to have a merchant's eye on. We talk about a lot about retail, but I don't think I talk enough about or with the merchants enough. So thank you for being the proxy for that, and it's great to have your North American experience. Now, where am I finding you today? You in Toronto today, New York? Where am I finding you? Today,
I'm in Toronto. And I know I'm generally everywhere, but today I'm in Toronto and it's snowing outside, which is...
It is.
We haven't had snow in a while.
We had a little dose and then it went away, and there's a little bit of snow. And you know what I used to say when I was in retail, a little bit of snow on the ground gets people thinking it's holiday time. So I like it. We got Black Friday. We're recording this on the U.S. Thanksgiving just before Black Friday. So it's a big, big weekend for retailers coming up. What do you do on Black Friday? Do you go out? I used to go out in the shopping mall. It's kind of a pedestrian thing to do, and kind of just watch the action sometimes at like a place like Yorkdale and kind of take the vibe, or just go online and do some shopping and just see what people are doing. Do you have anything you do on Black Friday or Cyber Weekend?
I do. I'm always looking at stores all the time, and I think if you're on the ground, you're where the action is. So I start with checking out what's happening online, and then I make my way to stores. Tomorrow, I think I'm actually going to check out the Well and maybe Queen Street and maybe Eaton Center. But I think Eaton Center is going to be packed, but that's exciting to me.
Well, both of the Well and the Eaton Center, for those who don't live in Toronto, the Well is this big kind of, big live, work, play, shop development that's really starting to come on its own. It takes a little bit of time for something that big to kind of get some traction. David Louis just opened up a store there for Kit and Ace.
Yes,
I think it's one of the latest stores. Got Style is there, and some other great merchants. Shops Drug Mart, there's a whole bunch. And then interesting about Eaton Center, I was there for the big Simon's opening, which took over from Nordstrom Space. And
we met there.
That's right. We were there.
Yes.
And I think the new Ely actually opens up today.
Yes.
Again, we're talking on in November. What's the date today? November 27, 28. So the new Ely Outpost. It doesn't look like a full Ely by the look of the plan, right? It looks like kind of like an outpost, yeah?
Yeah, I've seen a few photos. I think they had a pre-opening the other day, but I think it's going to be really interesting for the Eaton Center and also the commuters going through the Eaton Center. I think it's going to be, hopefully it'll elevate Eaton Center again to what it used to be. Maybe.
Yeah.
I hope so.
They're trying the same thing, by the way, in New York at Hudson Yards. Be sure and check that out. They got that 4th floor of the Hudson Yards shopping center.
Oh, yes.
It's kind of been a bit of a troublesome floor, right?
Yes.
And the Marcus is up there, and that didn't work out. And so they've got a similar type outpost there. Anyway, we digress, because the reason we're together on the mic today is you have another book, The Material Life Process Innovation for Retailers, coming out. I think it's available today for pre-order, right?
Yes, we actually just went live on Wednesday for pre-sale. So we've had a few orders come through, and we have quite a few retail executives and also a lot of retail and fashion schools interested in the book. So very, very excited.
You know, I know your focus is on sharing and teaching about merchandising. So I guess this is a funny question, but what prompted you to write this book? I mean, basically, was this a download of a lifetime of experience, or were you hearing or hearing from your clients, boy, there's a gap here. I think it deserves a longer treatment. Talk about the genesis of the book.
We were looking for interesting angles to explore for this book. So I went back to my early consulting days for inspiration. And that's where I really first learned about taking a completely different approach to creating apparel products. Instead of starting with design and then hunting for materials to match it, this approach flips the process. So you start with materials and then design into them. On paper, that sounds pretty straightforward, but in reality, it's not. Changing the process in this way has ripple effects across the entire value chain, all the way back to garment factories and mills. And the potential business impact is so significant. On top of that, there aren't really many, or if any, books that really dig into process innovation at the retailer or brand level, especially within the softline supply chain. So we figured this is a space worth exploring.
Yeah, it's a great point, because there's lots of process books all the way from very, very technical stuff. I've interviewed authors that I could barely understand what they're talking about, so technical, all the way to so strategic it's almost not unusable, but it's just hard to kind of get that and ground that in your day-to-day experience. What I loved about your book was very grounded in the day-to-day experience. Like if you're a merchant and no matter how long you've been a merchant, you're going to get something out of this book. So you open it with this provocative idea, as you say, that how the product is made is almost or matters more than what the product is. Now, retailers historically have obsessed over what to sell instead of the process behind the product creation. Has that been your experience?
Well, it's actually quite simple. So apparel, I really should say fashion, brands are expert marketers and designers. I mean, many of the biggest brands in the world are named after their designers. Me being, working at Ralph Lauren, I can say that that's absolutely true. So it should be the case that what to sell is top priority. Designers are incentivized to create newness for a product assortment, but it's hard to figure out what the next big thing is going to be. It's an intense creative effort. Now we're in a situation where cost pressure, tariff policy, and political conflict is forcing a collective reckoning in the softline supply chain. The industry loves low-cost sourcing, but that's hitting a very hard ceiling now. So we have to start thinking critically about how products are made. So from that perspective, you could say that process innovation, at least in this industry, is highly undervalued.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's interesting because when I think of big disruptions in the retail space, we've had several just in this decade, right? We had the COVID era. Yeah. And I think that taught us that we better be careful in supply chains. If we get them dialed down so tight that a disruption can really throw everything off, because, we just, weeks become months, and then suddenly real time becomes no time. And then,
of course, and I'll just add something else to that, if you don't mind. Some brands are absolutely turning their efforts towards process innovation. And I'll give you an example happening right now while hiding in plain sight. If you go to look at some of Lululemon's recent job postings, a lot of them are focused on their go-to-market evolution function. One that really stood out to me was a senior manager role for raw materials operations. And that might not sound like much at first, but in my experience, operations roles are usually tied to merchandising, and raw materials teams don't often have a strategic voice in the go-to-market calendar. So take that in combination with postings for that function, and it's a signal that process innovation is becoming a real priority for that brand.
Could you spend some more time on that? So you do talk about in the book about silos, as Steve Dennis would famously say, belong on farms. But
Yes.
talk about the silos within the merchandising function, because I think from the outside in we see. I know there's purchasing groups and then there's merchants, and is it been your experience that they don't always work together, but what you're seeing is more evolution towards that collaboration?
I'm seeing an opportunity to collaborate across all functions, not only merchandising. So if we think about materials specifically, they are everything, and materials are everything, and everything is materials. And when we talk about materials, I'm talking about fabric, textiles, print and pattern, color, trim. So all the components that go into making a product. And there's a need to accelerate the research and development of new materials. So there are a growing number of AI companies that are focused on this very area, and this will eventually impact apparel and footwear. The industry is seeking out viable alternatives to PFAS for good reason. And I'm saying all of this to underline the importance of the actual physical tactile material. So if we talk about the materials function within the retail organization, the process of designing and developing materials it's not clearly understood across the end-to-end process. So when I was a merchant for 2 decades, it was common during proto review and after assortment lock that, I would go in and ask for a change to the fabric or print, or maybe replace the style with something brand new. The merchant doesn't realize the impact of that change because we're so siloed. And materials and sourcing teams are not in the room when these types of decisions are being made. So achievability and feasibility are not considered in real time. And so materials teams will do everything they can to design and develop what the merchant is asking for, but at what cost? And when we think about these silos across design, development, materials, of course, merchandising, marketing, when materials teams are given this new task later on in the concept to market calendar, they're iterating with vendors, they're negotiating new costs. Maybe they're completely designing something new. They need to request new samples and updated fit, and they have to rush to meet production and delivery deadlines. It's chaotic. Everyone is scrambling. So that one decision that merchant makes in their little silo, not little, they make that change to a fabric or trim, it puts the entire assortment at risk, and it impacts margin, it impacts speed. And it's really, the foundation is because we are so siloed.
Right. It's kind of the old butterfly wings of theory of chaos, right? One little change turns into a tornado somewhere else in the system. I want to follow up on one thing kind of connected to that. As I think about merchandise, particularly apparel sourcing, I think of all these, a few moving parts, right? I think of the sustainability of the process. I think of the materials. You mentioned PFAS, the forever chemicals, kind of what materials go into the product. I think about the impact on the community where they're made, and I think about the post-use of those products. How do you think about that basket of things? I mean, it's ebbed and flowed to the degree to which there's been a focus on the impact on the community. For example, are we making sure that people are working in the right in the right environment where they're being made? It's Pakistan, India, wherever, and Vietnam. Or how do we make sure that that's happening? So assuming all that's right, there's a lot of other moving parts that really play into this. Is it your suggestion that the sourcing team really also own that part, because the merchants kind of focus on what goes to the customer?
I think yes and no. I think there has to be a lot more transparency across the organization and across functions within a brand. And when decisions are being made in isolation, really and truly relaying the impact of that decision and how it trickles down back towards, first mile or the beginning of the fashion supply chain, and how it impacts vendors. And when we think about transparency, it also will align to upcoming regulations, whether it's PFAS, whether it's digital product passport out of Europe that will eventually make its way to North America. it is really about breaking down those silos and being more transparent in the how, right? How we're creating that product.
Yeah, because there's external actors, right? California, Canada, the U.S., they're all working on sourcing policy and sourcing laws that are more involved than they have been in the past, right? And do you see those? I mean, it's a funny thing, right? Because on the one hand, consumers say they want all those elements to the product. We can go down this rabbit hole forever, you and I.
Yes, we can.
We won't go too far down it, but you and I both know there's also retailers out there, online retailers from China, that don't really pay much attention to all those things. Yet the Canadian consumer, U.S. consumer still buys. So how, when you sit down with merchants, I mean, it's a real puzzle. I remember I was presenting to a great group of merchants, and they asked me, how much does that stuff matter? And I'm like, I don't know anymore. I don't think it's a, on the one hand, people say, story matters and the brand matters and where it's made matters. On the other hand, people are buying from these factory direct things like it's going out of style and don't seem to care. So, how do merchants square that circle? They just kind of set their own philosophy and moral compass and go. Is that a kind of an assessment of yours?
I think the more we can educate our merchant teams, our product developers in what's happening at maybe tier 2 and tier 3 factories where we generally don't have a lot of visibility, if they can see truly how product is being made and how maybe there's some unethical practices happening at factory or at the mill or, during production, I think that's really going to help us educate the consumer. And we're seeing that, yes, there is a tremendous increase in activity and shopping with Shein, with some, direct from factory brands that are advertising on Amazon or even Walmart Marketplace, right? We're seeing it everywhere. The fact is the consumer doesn't know enough to even ask the question. And if the brand doesn't ask the question, it leaves this sort of uncertainty in what's acceptable and what's not, and what we will accept as a consumer and what we will not accept. But the more that we educate all parts of the supply chain, everyone in the brand, and of course the consumer, I think we'll start making better shopping and decisions around how we wear what we're wearing.
I love your optimism, but I'm not sure I buy it. Hey, let's get off that because we could go down that rabbit hole for a long time. I want to talk about the intersection of technology and merchandising. You talk about this in the context, and there's lots of elements of technology, but you brought it up already earlier about fabric. But this idea, I need fabric samples and the process, and I need to see, and what did you call it? The touch crutch. Which I love that term. But talk about the where you mentioned AI. Talk about where all these things come together to make process improvements and a better outcome for merchants.
Sure. How we're trained in the fashion industry is that we have to touch and feel the material on the surface, and how fabric feels is important in making assortment decisions. At some point, this turns into a problem. You end up needing to physically touch most of the assortment, and it becomes a crutch for decision making. These habits are deeply ingrained throughout the organization, which makes it tough to shift away from them or trust that technology could ever replace a physical sample. And this doesn't just apply to fabric or textile samples. It's the same story with color approvals too. Ideally, technology should help remove some of the subjectivity for more routine products. The physical touch should still matter, but it should be reserved for the most unique, innovative products, not every single one. And I'll add one last thing. When I was working with Ralph Lauren, or even like any brand that I work with that had a wholesale component, the sales teams going into market would routinely say, no sample, no sale. They conditioned their department store buyers or their specialty store buyers of the brand to be very dependent on having a sample in order to sell in to the collection. So it's really across every cross function in the supply chain, in the fashion concept to market calendar, specifically apparel, that I've seen in my decades of working in this industry, that when we have this mentality of no sample, no sale, or we have this touch crutch, we're never going to trust technology to help us make decisions on our assortment.
We'll be right back after these messages. The Voice of Retail is brought to you by Hale, the partner behind some of the fastest growing DTC and retail brands in North America. Hale is recognized for senior teams who cut out the noise and keep their focus on what matters most: growth. Their approach is based on outcomes, not hours. They are selective with who they partner with, bringing speed, accountability, and a clear strategy to every engagement. Paid media, content, performance, all of it connects directly to real results. That's why brands like A6 Sage and Orange Theory choose Hale to help them scale. Learn more at wearehale.com. You talk in the book about the material adoption rate, the MAR, as a governance concept. Yes. Tell us all about it.
So the material adoption rate is really about holding design teams accountable. When you track how many materials actually get adopted versus how many new developments are requested, you start to see how much time, effort, and money is being wasted on creating net new materials that never really go anywhere. In most cases, design teams don't have visibility into that total number of developments that each designer requests a season. They may not realize that they're duplicating something that maybe already exists in a material library or that they developed 3 seasons ago, and how much work goes into designing and developing each new material. They're usually not held accountable for the cost, both in dollars and time to market, because no one has clearly surfaced that overdevelopment is a problem. So simply tracking the total number of developments and their adoption rates is a powerful way to create that accountability. I'll tell you just one example. I was working with a global performance brand some time ago, and I'll tell you who it is later. But
I'm sure all the listeners are going, okay, yeah. Does it start with an L? Does it start with a V? Does it start with a...
I was shocked to see that there were thousands, and when I say thousands, I think the number was 7,000 zippers that were being developed for one season, like designed and developed. Like there is no reason. There's absolutely no reason to design and develop a zipper. Now, a big source of inefficiency is that lack of guardrails at the request stage. So designers can submit as many developments as they want to with virtually no constraints, which slows down the entire product creation process and it fuels over development. To be fair, though, many designers don't fully understand the effort required to develop a new material. So redundant or low priority requests, they become very common. And the last thing I'll say to that is that not every material that gets developed actually makes it into the seasonal assortment. So a lot of the work ends up being wasted and the cycle repeats season after season. My zipper example, deadlines get missed, decisions are delayed, and material teams are overwhelmed by requests that don't often line up to the priorities of that assortment. So without clear boundaries and better tracking, the system just keeps bogging itself down season after season.
So interesting. I mean, it's a great illustration. Your zipper illustration is a great illustration of many people asking for different things, but it felt like in that example, there was no one group or individual that kind of had that 10,000 foot view going, hey, this could result in thousands of different zipper designs. Are we?
Yeah.
And maybe we could do with 1,000 different zipper designs, not 7 anyway. It's a great illustration of the point you're making. So basically, I mean, if you summed up a couple of last questions, you're basically saying that there's a lot of emphasis in retail. You and I were talking about it off mic around stores, around wonderful experience, around all the different things that happen to drive profit, EBITDA, but that there's gold in them, their processes, that if they focus on what you're talking about in the book, that there's some good ROI and margin to be had from tweaking the existing processes. Yeah. All right. Now, let's talk about where and how people can get a hold of the book. As we said, it's now available. And how do people get their hands on it?
Well, it is on the Routledge Productivity Press website, which I'm pretty sure you have the link already. And we will start seeing it in specialty bookstores and online for purchase.
Fantastic.
And of course, all over my LinkedIn and our Retail Strategy Group page, and of course, the Merchant Life newsletter. Definitely.
Fantastic. Yeah. Now, just before I let you go, I wanted to get, I can't miss the opportunity of how you're thinking about 2026, just as a retail expert that you are, and think deeply about our business. I mean, I talk to retailers, and here in Canada, there's still an optimism to 2026. They feel a little bit like we now have a government that's focused on the economy, which augurs well. But on the other hand, we seem to have clear threats to the economy from things that are happening in the restructuring of trade and moving of big industries like automobile and softwood lumber. Now, to sum it all up, if you were sitting in a chair, chief merchant, you're like, how do we plan for 2026? What are the kind of assumptions that you would make that consumers are going to continue to be value focused in Canada, or there's opportunity for innovation, that people still respond to creativity? What are those kind of key things you might build a budget on?
Well, that is a great question. I think that it isn't just one thing in isolation. I would say that there's a few things that brands and retailers across the globe should be paying attention to. And it is about creating that right product at the right time, but also looking in the rear view, under the hood, and really understanding, are we capturing insights from our customer, learning from them, closing the feedback loop? Are we really connecting to the consumer with great product assortments? I think that I really expect retail to change around how they are looking at their suppliers, their vendor relationships, their internal teams, how they're looking at, let's just talk about materials for a second, because that's what this book is about. I think that we're going to see a lot more brands, like what Lululemon is doing right now, rethinking how they are going to market and evaluating their product creation process, thinking about a materials-led approach, and evaluating their vendors to work with them in creating that product. Hopefully seeing a lot more digital product creation practices to reduce overdevelopment. I think overdevelopment is something that is becoming more of a conversation across brands. And, I'll leave you with a couple of just things that we need to consider when creating product. Is treating materials as an afterthought weakens everything that follows. And investing in how products are made will impact the bottom line. And there's really no shame in being materialistic.
I love
from
that.
This perspective.
That's a good, there you go. There's the headline for the episode. Thanks for that. Doing my job for me.
You're welcome.
Hey, listen, you'll be at the NRF show. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. And if anybody's listening wants to get a hold of you, they can get you from your website, right? Same place you can find the book. Yeah.
Yep. Website, all over social. Yes. And of course, sign up for the Merchant Life newsletter. It goes live every Monday, and you'll find all of our details in there.
Fantastic. Well, Lisa, thanks again for joining me on the podcast. Such a great welcome guest, and it's great to connect with you again. Looking forward to see you in person, even though we're in the same city. It doesn't feel, it's almost easier to connect in New York. But anyway, have a great holiday season. I look forward to your anecdotes about the Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and I'll see you in the Big Apple.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of The Voice of Retail. If you haven't already, follow on your favorite podcast platform so new episodes will land automatically each week. And be sure and check out my other retail industry media properties, the Remarkable Retail Podcast with Steve Dennis and the Global E-Commerce Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, Senior Retail Advisor, Keynote Speaker,